Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Whiskey Cavalier. A great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we have the return of Alderman, which took me by surprise. It never crossed my mind to think, oh, he'd still be alive. I guess the knife to the chest wasn't enough to put him down. To be fair, Ray survived his gunshot, so I guess it's just only befitting that Alderman survived the knife, because it turns out he's the person they're supposed to be protecting because he has a connection to the trust. But in the long run, it turns out that he was manipulating this whole situation because it was him taking advantage and getting him transferred, so basically he can get a squad to bust him out, which is interesting considering the fact is like, well, how did he manage it? Well, we do know that the trust has people in all different facets of government, so he probably just got someone from higher up to do it, to get him taken care of. Because I was wondering which way the episode was going to go. Was it going to be like, oh, the trust is sending people to kill him because he knows so much, or are they working with him? And lo and behold, it turns out they're working with him. I love that moment of Standish being like, I'm not going to lose my computer. It's like, see, it's a good thing I kept my computer. Also, I have a whole bunch of music up here downloaded that I just don't want to have to go through the trouble of re-downloading and have to re-get all over again. So there's that. But when they bring Alderman back, lo and behold, everyone on the team is shocked, because this is all coinciding with the fact that they're doing Secret Santa, and Jay got put in charge of it because Susan's telling him to be a little more social with people and stuff like that. He's like, because guys know I'm not very good at, when it comes to other people, and he kind of, pretends to be, he mutters being like, no, Jay, you're great, don't sell yourself short like that. He's like, I know, but yeah. And Susan got pissed because she got picked as Ray's Secret Santa. And I love that conversation between Frankie and Will, because Will's like, no, because Edgar's tripping about the whole Tina situation, about her having to seduce someone. And I love Frankie being like, oh, no worries. It's like, actors who, had to, fake it for a sex scene. It's like, oh, yeah, and at the end of the day, it's all fake. And she's like, oh, it's like that because when it's all said and done, it's all fake. And then you have Frankie being like, oh no, that the fact is sometimes you have to have sex to actually make the scene look real, and leaving Edgar with that, and it sends him in an immediate panic mode. Even Susan's like, yes, that was mean, but it was so enjoyable and well worth it. So there's that. But also the conversation of Will being like, oh, Standish has got to just trust Tina. You got to trust someone wholly. And then you have Frankie be like, you can't possibly trust anyone entirely. He's like, yeah, I do. I trust you entirely. She's like, especially considering everything that's happened between us. He's like, yeah. And I love she brings up the scenario of okay, here's a situation of this and that. I love the scenario she brings up of oh, there's a dude here and I'm in this lingerie outfit, and Will breaks down being like, it's this and that. Most likely something happened. You had to put him in a bath, and you wear this particular because obviously you weren't wearing it under your clothes, and your clothes got wet, so you had to put on something else, and you put on something that you knew that I would really like. And she's like, at the end of it, Will's explanation of him kind of putting his twist to it, his turn to it, his very oh, I trust you and understand completely about what the circumstances are in this situation. She's like, you're insane. He's like, insane in a good way. Just the flirtation between them is so nice. I love it too. Oh yeah, at the end of the day, you still didn't tell me why we got married. She's like, you had a rich uncle that passed away, and I got with you for the inheritance. He's like, huh, okay. But obviously, I love it too, where Susan was like, when they were interrogating Alderman, she was like, okay, you need to get him, be overly friendly with him. And Frankie's like, I'm going to pull a bullet in your head right now. And then Susan's like, why do I even bother? And Edgar's like, yeah, but to be fair, we all were thinking the same thing. And Jay's nodding too. And she's like, yeah, I know, but still. But I do like what he does try to do. He tries to dismantle the team because he has files on everyone, knows everything that he knows. He brings up the whole Will and Frankie thing, obviously the sexual tension between them. Even the fact is that apparently Frankie was going to kill Will. She actually got permission to kill him at the end of the mission to leave no loose ends, CIA and all that. Plus she is, familiar with killing people. But what makes it even more messed up is apparently Frankie asked for permission to kill Will. So it wasn't even on the table until she put it on the table. I even love it later on. She'd been like, nah, that was back then. That was when we first met. It's no big deal. He's like, it's not going to be just that short and sweet. It's like we got to talk deeper about like that whole situation itself, because it came up about like Will put in, you know, obviously a report about her being dangerously unstable and untrustworthy, and Frankie kind of looks to him. He's like, to be fair, that was like the first mission when we first met. Plus, it was super true. And she's like, fair point. I love that even Frankie couldn't deny everything about that. Obviously, like, Jay and his not really getting close to people, him being isolated, turns out that's from Susan's profile. And it's like, oh, everything with Tina and Edgar. It's like, oh, yeah, like her, you know, thinking about all the things that she's probably doing at Miami mission. And you doing what you normally do, Edgar, and that's sabotaging everything. He's like, and even Edgar being like, yeah, I probably will end up doing that. So he did a very good job of dismantling the team, and now we know why that ended up happening. It's because Todd was on his side. Would not have guessed that. It's so sad because Edgar just got his nemesis last episode. But to be fair, I guess that's part of the reason why Todd was on sabbatical. That's probably why. They even had this little moment with him early in the episode where it's like Susan was trying to get Ray a gift, and she had gift wrapped Todd's stapler, and he knew exactly what it was and got it. But it's like that little moment like that. What should have been a key sign that it was Todd is Todd got a report like on his watch or whatever and be like, oh, it's Allerman here, and he told Ray. They made sure no one knew who the target was because they didn't want anyone else to know. Plus, they didn't want Ray to find out. So it's like the fact is that he knew ahead of time should have been a key sign that it was him. I didn't find out until we saw kind of like his sleeve when he was holding the phone for Susan. I was like, it's Todd. So that was interesting. But Ray went crazy because obviously he got pissed because like that's the dude who shot him, and he went and he punched and kicked the shit out of Allerman. So, and I love, we also learned an interesting thing of like, Will was like, oh yeah, like, you know, we can't let Ray know about Allerman, you know. It was a pretty rough, you know, by his bedside after he got shot. Frankie was like, wait, what? You were by his bedside? He was like, well, yeah. And it's like, even though he's pissed at Ray, even though he's kind of giving Ray the cold shoulder and all that, currently, the fact is, even after the whole Gigi thing, after him getting shot, you still cared about him because you still stuck by his side, which is so interesting. It's like, oh man, that's so sweet. And now that I'm actually bringing that up, that's actually what actually turned the tide for Frankie and Will. She was dead set on killing him. Like, the fact that she could have killed him at any point in time, but maybe at that point in time earlier in the first episode, she didn't necessarily have permission at those multiple chances she had to just kill him. She just locked him in the trunk with Edgar. Maybe she was going to wait till the proper moment, till the mission was fully over, then kill him. Or, like I said, she was waiting for permission to come through. But if it wasn't for Will saving her life and being there for her, that changed her mind on Will of like, no, I'm not going to kill him. So now they're allowed to be where they are right now with a very dysfunctional relationship that they have. So there's that. So I just got to quickly get that out of my mind. But yeah, like, I guess Will didn't want Ray to know that either, because he was like, don't tell Ray. He's not supposed to know that. I guess because if Ray did, Ray would think like, oh no, you do still care about me. It'd make it seem like Will might not be as pissed at him as, you know, Ray's under the impression. So they leave Jay there, and Jay, you know, because he was Will's Secret Santa. I got him like a British bowler hat, and he's like, hey, the fact is, it's a representation of the gentleman, and that's what I think you are. And it's like, oh, thanks for the compliment. I love it. And it's like, see, you care about people. You know this much about Will. You can be here to look after Ray. And Will was like, Frankie's like, you're not actually going to wear that silly hat. He's like, well, what was I supposed to say? An English bowler hat? Which, even at the end of the episode, he's like, honestly, it's kind of growing on me. So that's pretty cool. Which is interesting considering your girlfriend Emma is British, too. So I would think that would kind of play some role in that. But maybe not. Maybe that'll be something we see in the future. But nevertheless, it is crazy that it ends up being Todd. And I love Ray coming in there when it comes time to save Susan and everything. And he does his thing. He's put on his acting and everything. Todd's like, how long have you been working with Allerman? He's like, well, I never have been. Grabs a gun from the dude. Bam, blam, 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 blam. It's like, yo, look at Ray being a badass. Because he got that pep talk from Will being like, you were one of the best agents I know. The fact of the matter is you saved my ass multiple times, even though you've never known, it seemed like you never knew what you were doing. He's like, I never did. He's like, well, that's your superpower. You're good at improvising. And when he improvises, he's a badass. And I love it being like, yo, he's like, okay, I'm lowering the gun. You know, Todd, and Todd's looking at him, and Jay puts one between his eyes, and and I love Jay's reaction of, yes, Standish is going to be so jealous that I was the one that ended up killing Todd. I love that just immediate reaction. And, you know, Ray's like, oh man, I did good, right? Susan's like, you did great, which I'm like, oh, this might be some kindling that even more. But it's like, yo, Ray was a super badass. Because we've seen him as kind of like the bumbling goofball. You do underestimate the fact is that he is actually really good at his job. He can be a bit of an idiot, but he's really good at his job, and especially when he go and gets tough. In particular, you know, Susan was in danger, so I think that's when he was kind of like, you know, type of nut up or shut up type of situation. So I thought that was pretty dope. I did love that Frankie wanted to try and convince Alderman that she had switched sides, ends up shooting Will, obviously in the leg to make it look real, and then she shot him again, nearly missing him. The next bullet grazed him. I was actually surprised. I thought it would be like, oh, the bullet missed him completely. It's like, no, it was meant to look real enough so she had it graze him. But Alderman knew that it was BS because he saw Frankie looking back. Before, if she was who she was before in the first episode, she wouldn't have looked back. She wouldn't have looked concerned, but she looked down at Will. She was actually kind of scared and worried, like, okay, I'm making sure that he's okay. Showing, you know, because obviously that's the thing about this team. They have changed. They aren't the same people that they were before. Jay isn't the same person. Neither is Will and Frankie in regards. Well, Will's kind of the only person that's kind of stayed exactly the same. Obviously, even though he's stayed exactly the same in certain regards, he's still grown out of this situation. Sadly, they had to let Alderman go, you know, so he can make sure that Frankie stayed alive, but he didn't get the files he needed. We end up learning, obviously, the whole thing about the trust is that they disable governments and stuff like that, so it leaves a lot of money to be opened up, so they snatch it up, and obviously, like, the large-scale operations that they're moving at, they need money, and so that's what this is about. It's also about getting this money so that they can, fund their attacks, because it isn't just one attack. They're funding multiple attacks all over the place. Granted, they don't have the money necessarily, at least in certain regards. I mean, they probably gathered it in other means, but they'll probably have to compensate for Alderman in some shape or form the money that he kind of screwed them out of in this episode. I mean, it wasn't his fault, but it was Will's. But I love Will being like, oh, I'm going to put a bullet between your eyes. It was like, that's heavy foreshadowing. It's like, you won't have to worry about a knife next time. It'll be a bullet, you know? So you can tell that's going to be heavy-ass foreshadowing. An interesting little detail is obviously the person who was fighting for the sniper or the gunner that was initially helping Alderman at the, you know, during the convoy, but obviously also at the end of the episode. They make such a point of point out the gun, which means it's going to be a key that we see later on, a key thing of importance. Obviously, a person of suspicion is Emma, because obviously she's at the top of a lot of people's, you know, suspicions about, like, yeah, people still don't trust her. So even I'm kind of getting the feeling, because it's just like, oh, she just happens to not be here during an episode. But then there's also part of me that's like, what if we end up finding out it's Tina? I highly doubt it. I mean, there's a possibility that, well, it's just kind of interesting because Tina was on her mission at this particular time, so maybe that could have been her, you know. Maybe not. Or maybe it is Emma. Maybe it's supposed to look like it might be potentially Emma, and it turns out it is Tina, which would suck in Edgar's case, and maybe it's suck in Will's case because Will doesn't trust her when the time comes, even though he makes such a point of, like, always trusting people. When the time comes, maybe he doesn't trust Emma, and that causes problems in their relationship. Maybe. We'll ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. I did like when it was all said and done, though, they're all celebrating, and it's like, oh, Tina, it's like, oh yeah, I heard your message, Standish, and I love that he was actually trying to delete it earlier in the episode, but she thought it was really sweet, and she bought him back some rum, and it's like, yeah, should I ask about Miami? She's like, no, and he's like, oh, okay, I'm never going to Miami, and then it's like, oh, he ends up getting Jay a watch, and they're both kind of looking at their gifts. He's like, you want the rum? And Jay's like, yes, this is a much better gift. And they're like, should we do it? And they chest bump, because earlier he's like, should we chest bump? He's like, no. Shall we silently fist bump? He's like, okay, that's acceptable. And they do it, but this time they actually do chest bump, and it's like, you see everyone in the team getting closer. And I love Susan telling Will, it's like, okay, you know, Ray came through this time. He's like, all right. He's like, good job, Ray, and ends up patting him on the shoulder. And when his back is turned, Ray losing his damn mind, pointing out to Susan, like, oh my God, did you see what he just did? And the moment Will turns around, he tries to act all cool about it and stuff. I love that. That was pretty dope. So obviously, Will's, was Secret Santa for Frankie, and he ends up getting her chain, and the bullet that she shot him with was on it. So a little sentimental gift between both of them. So, like I said, overall a great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. I mean, in particular, finding out who that person is. I mean, finding out also more about the trust, like more about the organization. Obviously, we know what they're all about, but who they are exactly. Obviously, there are different people in different governments. Obviously, we saw with Todd's situation that obviously not everyone can be trusted. Once again, meaning like even Tina and even Emma are now suspects too. Like, we don't know how deep this situation might run. My mind is starting to lean towards Tina now, just because, it's like poor Edgar, But it's probably going to go to Will as well. If not, it might end up being both of them. But I think it'd be interesting on both cases. It'd definitely be interesting if it was Emma, because obviously, like, as we dive deeper into like the whole thing of like Will having, trusting people and stuff like that. And obviously, like after the whole Gigi situation, obviously, like he's had reservations about, trust. Well, his trust has been hurt a little bit, but he's kept it up with everyone else, and obviously is building back up with Ray. But it would be a crushing blow to find out, like, oh, Emma was the one behind it. Because I think that'd be very impactful, too. Because, like, obviously, we know how protective Frankie can be when it comes to Will. The way she reacted to the way that Ray hurt him. Which is so interesting, because that was right after the mission she was willing to... No, that wasn't right after. It was a little bit after, because obviously it was, like, the second episode. But that was after the mission where she wanted to kill Will. So it's interesting to see how things... I mean, that shows you how much of an impact Will had on her. But I think when the time comes, she's going to mess Emma up. If it turns out Emma is bad, like I said, this is all hypothetical. It's just, it's been brought up before, so now it's kind of in the back of my mind. So I'm interested to see if we are going down that route with Emma, or Tina, or if not both, or maybe neither. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. Like I said, I'm interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.